Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're out the range with a tricked out AK. This time we're going to talk about accessories from SureShot Armament Group or SureShot USA. And SureShot is all over X. That's how I learned about them. And I also talked to them at SHOT Show, and they make some really cool accessories for AKs. Now, if you go back in time, the whole Alpha AK was a real thing. People wanted to build guns that looked just like the Alpha AKs. Larry Vickers kind of made those popular. And so you had companies out there like Zenneco and stuff that would import the parts that were really expensive and hard to get at times. Well, now we're seeing U.S. companies like SureShot coming up and making accessories that allows you to modernize the AK, give it M-LOK rails like you see here, 1913 rails across the top, side folding stocks that are also adjustable for length of pull. We'll get into all of that in today's video, talking about this particular Mark III setup. And there's quite a few different versions of this rail system or chassis system that SureShot offers. We're just going to talk about the Mark III on this particular rifle today. So let's jump into today's video, taking a closer look at this tricked out 7.62 by 39 Lee Armory AK. When I was younger, I lived in Army surplus stores. That's what we called them anyway. Yeah, some people call them Army Navy stores, whatever. Surplus stores. Lived in them, loved them, really looked forward to the days that I got to go typically on the weekends when I was in high school. Well, in 2025, surplus stores are kind of hard to find. And the surplus stores that we once knew as kids, well, they're long gone. And the stuff that you will find in these stores typically is like party favors, like leather motorcycle jackets and weird stuff, cheap knives and weird things like that. Well, Venture Surplus is online, and they're like your classic surplus store. They have constantly rotating stock. They have actual government surplus, BDUs, boonie hats, gloves, hatch gloves, anything you can think of. And it's just amazing to go through. There's just page after page after page of actual military surplus and tested items. And so you can find things like this Condor jacket, but then you can find proper BDUs. You can find just about anything you're looking for and really fair pricing. Another thing that they have that I thought was interesting are actual MREs. And these things are somewhat iconic. Now, you either love or hate MREs, but you can't deny the fact that they're great long-term food storage items that are shelf-stable for years, depending on when you buy them, when they were manufactured. But the over at Venture Surplus, they don't just have MREs, they also have just dried goods, long-term storage food that's shelf-stable from 5 years to 30 years. Everything you need. So it's a great place to check out. I highly recommend swinging by and checking out Venture Surplus. I'll drop a link in the video description below. All right, so the first thing we got to get out of the way is that no two AKs are alike. Even if they come from the same series, AKM 100 series, crank, whatever, they can all be a little bit different. So making accessories for AKs like handguards can be a bit challenging, and getting them mounted in the past could have been very challenging, and SureShot has remedied some of that. So when you go to the website and you're looking for the different accessories for your rifle, they'll be broken down into type of AK, AKM 100 series crank, again, that type of stuff. But also on top of that, the rails like the Mark III that we have here for this AKM, this Mark III rail system is very adjustable. So instead of having to modify the rail or the rifle or both, I have little like slots for the screws that clamp to the barrel and the receiver and stuff like that. They can move back and forth, up and down, left and right. And yes, there are a bunch of screws in here, just Loctite them, but you can get the stuff mounted to your gun very snugly, very nicely without having to break out the files, right? So that's really nice. It saves the finish, and it also saves a lot of frustration. Back in the day, you could screw up some very expensive Zenneco gear trying to get it onto your rifle, or screw up a very expensive rifle. So you don't have to worry about that with the SureShot. Now, when you're installing it, I would say that you want to be mechanically inclined, but it's also very intuitive to install. You really need to understand how AKs work and understand how the handguards and stuff mount like that. And if you understand your AK rifle, then if you have just basic skills, you should be able to get this mounted to your rifle with a little bit of time. Give it about a half hour to get it on, get everything adjusted and locked down and tested. So it doesn't take a whole lot of time, but you do want to be somewhat mechanically inclined. So let's start off talking about some of the features on this particular rifle in this Mark III setup. And there's different versions of it. I'm not going to be able to cover them all in this video. The version that we have here when we get up here talking about the top cover and stuff is what we're going to talk about in today's video. So back here, we have a side folding. It attaches to your existing side folding furniture. Now, I don't see a real benefit to it folding because, first of all, this particular rifle with the button here, it acts as a spring, wants to push the stock away, but also the accessory rail over here keeps it from staying flush against the side of the rifle. So technically, I would just leave it extended and use it as an adjustable length to pull. This is the SS19 stock, and it is a one-for-one copy of the AK-19 stock. And so it's made right here in the United States, and it's a really nice copy of that stock. So you have this adjustable length to pull. Now you got 4.5 and 5.5 millimeter pins. This system will work with either. Again, pick that option from the website when you're ordering your parts. You will notice that it has QD mounts back here, right, on the stock. And as we come forward, you can see that this is a sectioned top cover. It's not all one piece. So the handguard back here, you have the handguard that's one piece. You have the top piece here that connects to the handguard that's screwed together. That first top piece comes back to about here, has 1913 rails that come back, and then it's sectioned, and then this little stumpy half top cover back here is all part of this particular Mark III. Now there's a Mark II that has a top that just comes back here, extends the 1913 rail back here, but you would use your standard existing OEM top cover. This replaces all of that. Again, so many different options. I highly recommend going through the site, looking for what's available and what would fit the rifle that you're trying to modify. All right, so you'll notice that it's left the iron sight in place back here, does replace the OEM gas tube, and everything else out here. This is a little bit longer. They have slightly shorter versions of this handguard. I believe there's different options as well with 1913 rails, maybe even key mod. So there's a bunch of different options. Again, check them all out. Now, you're probably wondering about the suppressor. This video isn't about the suppressor. This is a Stava 3D printed can, supposed to be a low back pressure can. We'll talk more about this in the future. This is something we just started testing, and it's really, really interesting to me. So anyway, that's why it's on this particular rifle. Back here, this is a Novus IP87 clone, and that would be very similar to what the Russians use for a red dot sight right now. And these are out there. They're a little bit hard to find, but and you'll find them on airsoft sites, believe it or not, but it is rated, according to Novus, for use on an actual firearm, even though you might find them on an airsoft site. So anyway, I like using them. They look really, really good, and they work quite well. All right, let's do a little bit of shooting with it. Let's take the gun apart and have a closer look at how the top cover and stuff like that works. And yeah, what's really interesting, guys, is this may look heavy, but you know, when you take a look at other systems that are out there, you have Midwest Industries and other companies making similar type systems with rails and handguards and stuff. This seems to be fairly lightweight. Now the can is 3D printed, and it's not a super heavy can either, but it seems to balance really, really nicely, and it doesn't add a whole lot of weight, making the gun very clumsy. I've messed with some rails in the past that really made the gun muzzle heavy and off balance, and it wasn't as nice. This definitely seems to fit and work quite nicely in terms of balance and stuff like that and weight distribution. All right. When you start putting stuff like this on your rifle, it'll change the dynamic a bit, certainly how you disassemble and maintain the firearm. For example, with this handguard and many others like it, getting the gas tube out of the gun would be more difficult. It's not something you normally would need to do. When I clean AKs, I don't always pop the gas tube off and clean it. There's just no real reason to. It's a big open tube, and it's, for the most part, self-cleaning, but it does make it a little bit more difficult. But they've done a nice job in how this particular setup works, because again, we have this particular version of it has the top cover come all the way back and it replaces the OEM top cover. The Mark II would just have the 1913 rail come back to here and use your standard OEM. So this is really cool how they pulled this off, and I already talked about the segmented top cover. So let's take it apart really quick and show you how this works. First, magazine's out of the weapon. Check that chamber, make sure that it's empty, and then it just starts off just like you would disassembly for any other AK. Push in on this little tail, kind of wiggle the top cover until it pries off. Nice and snug, and that's good because it has 1913 rails back here. Now what's interesting is when you put this top cover on, it kind of goes in, nose down, and then as you tap it down, it'll engage right here and take any slop out of it, so it's not going to wiggle. So when you push it down, it snugly fits, and pop it down, it pops up into this dovetail, if you will, here, and it makes everything nice and rigid. Now, you just take your standard recoil spring and guide rod out, draw your bolt and carrier out, and that's it, guys. That's all you really need to do to maintain an AK. You don't need to take that gas tube out. If you want to punch that gas tube, you can use, in my years in the past, I've used like 12 gauge or 410 gauge bore swabs to kind of oil and wipe down the inside of the gas tube. You can do that if you really feel it necessary, but I don't really worry about that all that much. If you shoot corrosive ammo, flush the entire gun with water and then hit it with a spray lube and make sure you got lube everywhere. I use an air hose to blow the lube everywhere. A WD-40 is good for displacing the water, then lubing it afterwards, stuff like that. So anyway, putting this back together, you just kind of reverse the process. To do that, there's one little thing here that you'll want to know about. So this is not the OEM gas tube in here. This is part of the SureShot handguard system. So it's a little shorter gas tube, has a little bit of an opening here. So when the gas piston goes in, it can drop down that opening and hit the edge, and it'll make it difficult to go home. You got to get the nose of this piston up. The pistons on AKs tend to wobble. They're pinned in there, and that's by design. So what I found with this is if I put the bolt carrier and bolt in, and it kind of hangs up a little bit, like right there, I just kind of wiggled it around, and it went in. But if I have if I'm having trouble and I'm hitting that little ledge, just invert the rifle, put it in, slide it forward, and it'll go together just fine. Take your top cover, kind of set it in there like that, make sure it's lined up, and then just kind of push down, and that's it. Back together. So overall, I want to say that the SureShot rail systems are among my favorite, if not my favorite right now. I really want to play with the crank setup. I don't have a crank to put the rail on. I do have the rail. I need to get a PSA crank or something and put it on there. I do have my 300 Blackout, but it does have a different gas system. We'll have to explore it. But you may see more of these rails popping up in future videos just because I really do like them. I think that they're well executed. I love the fact that you don't need to modify the weapon or the rail system. Everything is adjustable for the installation, and it's just really, really easy to do compared to some of the earlier rails I've played with for AKs. Now, the price. That's going to be the sticking point for a lot of you guys because people still think AKs are $300 guns. They haven't been $300 guns for a very long time. Even PSA AKs, domestically produced AKs, are going to be, close to $1,000. So $700 for a rail like this is pretty spicy, right? It's going to almost double the cost of your rifle. But the functionality is something that I think a lot of AK users are going to want to have. And there's a lot of machining here and a lot of aluminum that went into producing this. Now, there are less expensive versions of this, so they're going to vary in price by 100 and 150 bucks and stuff, but even the more affordable ones are going to still be in the $600 price range. So again, that's something just to be aware of. But in terms of the quality, the fitment, the adjustability, all that stuff, it's top notch. And I really do like the SureShot armament rail systems. If you guys have any questions, ask those questions down below. I will try to stick around for the first couple of days after I post this video and others to answer the questions you guys may have. If you would like to support us here at the Military Arms Channel, the best way to do that is to become part of our Patreon family. I will put a link in the video description below. Also, right here on YouTube, you got the join and thanks button underneath the video player you're watching right now. Hit either one of those buttons and you can help support us right here on YouTube in the age of demonetization. Thank you for 17 years of support. Swing by and check out Copper Custom. We'll talk to you guys soon.